to Cryptocast, second episode of Tales from the Past. On behalf of the Australian Yowie Project, I'm Ray Doherty, and thanks for tuning in and having a listen. We continue our new series on reading from papers of the past, going back into newspapers from the Australian pioneering days, or days past is probably a pretty good description. Today we're going to start with the Darling Downs Gazette on Saturday, October 19, 1912, on page 5. This looks like it's a syndicated story from New South Wales. I would like to find the original New South Wales story, but this is what we'll go with, so we'll have a read of it from here and see how it sounds. For many years, that is the wrong story. For many years past, the people around Bombala in southern New South Wales have claimed possession of a hairy man. Bushmen at various times have reported that they have seen an immense ape-like animal, but it always managed to escape on them. On Wednesday last, word came through Mr. Sidney Jeffcott, owner of Creewar Station 20 miles from Bombala, that in the thick bush on his property yesterday he discovered the tracks of an apparently immense animal. These tracks were identical with those of a human foot, but measured 18 inches in length and 8 inches across. Mr. Jeffcott ordered a quantity of plaster in Paris to be sent out from Bombala for the purpose of taking impressions. Word was also received today that a man named Summerell, while shooting in the bush, came across an immense object resembling a man. On Summermill approaching, however, the creature picked up a stick and emitted a growling noise and disappeared. Portions of Creewar are very rough and scrubby, giving the mysterious animal excellent opportunities for hiding. Now, that's a pretty good witness report, wouldn't you say? From 1912. So that, when you think about it, 1912 is not exactly that far ago. Yes, it's 108 years ago. But in the grand scheme of things, as we know Australia today, it's not that long ago, really. I mean, where I live in North Brisbane, in the Moreton Bay region, Indigenous Australians were still living traditionally until about 1926. And that's really not that long ago. That's less than 100 years ago. So let's see what else we can find. These stories are fascinating, and I hope you're enjoying them. This next story is probably my most favourite story of the hairy man from the Australian archives and the Australian newspaper, digitised newspapers. This is, again, a case of mistaken identity, and as we alluded to in the last episode, a lot of people used to live traditionally in the bush, and a lot of Westerners, people from England, Australians, Ireland, they came here and they just wanted to disappear. They wanted to blend out of or just fade out of modern society and live a simpler life. And that's nothing wrong with that. I mean, that appeals to a lot of people even today. But this is the story, and perhaps you know it, of the Canoblis hairy man, Canoblis, Canoblas. This was reported in the Queanbeyan Age newspaper, which is near Canberra, ACT, on Wednesday, the 13th of September, 1899. The Canoblis hairy man. For some weeks past, the residents of Canoblis district near Orange, but for some reason it's reported in the Queanbeyan Age, have been startled occasionally by the appearance of an eccentric individual camped in the neighbourhood, but where his place of abode was could not be ascertained. He allowed no one to approach him, making off to the bush when any attempt was made to obtain an audience. All that could be told of him that he was covered in very long hair, that his clothes were in tatters, and that he was a foreigner. The residents deemed his presence undesirable and informed the police. Constable Riley went out and searched, but failed to find his quarry until the night, when he saw the man sitting by a campfire. On the constable approaching, he made off, and Constable Riley followed, and after a smart chase effected a capture. He brought him into Orange and presented him before the bench, where he was remanded. The man, covered with abnormal growth of hair, his beard and head covering reaching his waist, and the only visible features are two small piercing eyes. He is unknown amongst farmers, as the hairy man. Now, this story actually goes on, and I won't read you all the stories, but there's this story, and there's another one very similar to it in New South Wales, where for many years they just thought it was the actual hairy man. They thought it was the legend that the indigenous people told them, when quite a lot of them have turned out to be, as I've just described here, have turned out to be people looking to disappear, looking to fade out of society, looking just to live a simpler life in the bush, away from everyone else. And as I said before, there's a lot to be attractive about that sort of lifestyle, and a lot of people do it today, all around the world. But this was a good one, and there's quite a number of stories through Trove where people have been mistaken for hairy men who just want to live a quieter life. Let's move on to the next story. You might find this one interesting as well. This one is fascinating. It's from New Zealand, but it's reported in the Brisbane Sunday Mail on Sunday, the 10th of February, 1952. Now, our New Zealand friends listening to this may be familiar with this story, but there are lots of stories, even today, still getting around in New Zealand because something is there. If anything's going to exist undiscovered, it's going to be in New Zealand. That I have no doubt. This was reported, the story came in from Wellington, New Zealand, reported in the Sunday Mail, as I said, Sunday 10th of February 1952. Page 3. It's titled Gorilla or Hairy Man. In the wild bush country in the Coromandel Peninsula, only 40 miles from Auckland, New Zealand's largest city, a strange hairy being is lurking. Some settlers firmly believe it is a gorilla left there 30 years ago by a ship which had it as its mascot, but others claim it is a large, hairy, bearded man living in a cave deep in the forest. Whatever it is, the story has seized New Zealand's imagination. So far, no one has been game enough to track down the unknown monster. The director of the Auckland Zoo, Mr. R.W. Roach, says it is possible, but highly improbable, that the strange creature is a gorilla. But it is Posidic, P-O-S-S-I-D-I-C, I don't know what that means. It is a member, I guess it's possible, I guess that means it's possible. So let's just say, but it is possible. It is a member of the baboon family, because gorillas are strictly vegetarian and would have been unable to live in New Zealand bush for 30 years. Well, that's true, given the fact that the oldest gorilla known to have lived is only 44. So I guess, possible, but unlikely. As he said, gorillas are vegetarian and they eat very specific foods. The Chacma, C-H-A-C-M-A, baboon, he says, this is Mr. Roach, director of the Auckland Zoo, frequently utters wild barks and snarls. It lives longer than gorillas and keeps company with human beings. For a year or two, Coromandel has been treated to periodic stories of night intrusions into camps and outlying farms by a strange monster uttering bestial screams. This week, 2 pig hunters, Roy Norman and Douglas Tiwana, I hope I pronounced that right, T-A-I-W-H-A-N-A. So Roy and Doug, 2 pig hunters, said they caught a fleeting glimpse of the hairy man, or possibly a gorilla, running along a bush track. Another pig hunter, Andrew Beasley, claims to have found a cave with evidence of a man or beast living under primitive conditions. The cave contained bleached bones of animals, presumably eaten raw, and a collection of shells. Now, I don't know about you, and that is only 1952. In the news article, they actually have a map of the location. But again, there's not a lot of follow-up on these things. But the great thing about this is it gives you names of witnesses, gives you dates and times, places. And how the media has changed, where this is actually taken seriously. Whereas unlike today, they can't help but have a cheap laugh, at the expense of witnesses or researchers. I can tell you the people that have an experience, they don't think it's funny. most people who haven't experienced, especially a close one, are either shocked because they can't process what they see, or they are energized by it. It sort of gives you a bit of a high, obviously adrenaline, but it piques your curiosity to the point where you're almost like a little high when you want to know more and you want to know more, and you go on this obsessive learning path. But either way, it's people generally still have problems processing what they see when they see it. I was out in the field once with a fellow that hadn't had any experiences whatsoever, and he was very interested to know more. This is the day. You can actually find it on YouTube under the channel Ants Jet. That's researcher Ants Lapanovich's page, or Ants for short, where he put up their video that I recorded quite a number of years ago now, where we not only saw one, me and this other fellow, not Ants, but me and this other fellow, we saw one running away on the riverbank away from us, and then we recorded a howl. Now, for me, I thought that was fantastic. I thought, great, because I've had encounters before, and I've seen them before, and I've heard their howls before, but never that close. Never within 100 meters, or however far away it was. I recorded it on a phone. But the fellow I was with, Brad, he had a hard time with it. He had a hard time processing what he saw and what he had heard, because he said to me in no uncertain terms, a part of him didn't believe they were real. And after what he saw and what he heard, he now knows they are. In fact, I would often find Brad would ring me, and he would go back to that place on his own during the day when he's supposed to be working, sitting quietly, waiting to hear the same thing again, or waiting to encounter the same thing again. But he never did. It was fascinating, a fascinating experience to see his reaction to it all. And the same thing here, but the media is taking it seriously in this article, unlike the media of today. This last one for today is from the Richmond River Herald and Northern Districts Advertiser, Friday the 10th of November 1893. The other thing I love about these old newspapers is that they call them all the same thing pretty much, the hairy man. But this one, the Richmond River Herald and Northern Districts Advertiser, Friday 10th of November 1893. Mr. Marin recently met with a rather awkward reception as he was going into Captain Flat near Birdwood. Shortly after the turn-off road from Coomber, within 2 or 3 miles of the Flat Township, he noticed his dog running up out of the bush at full tear and cleared off down the road in a terrible scare. He got down to see what had frightened him when a formidable animal with which he was entirely unacquainted jumped up on the lower bank of the road. It frightened him as much as it did the dog, and it was standing up on its hind legs, with its forearms stretched out like the arms of a man. The road, being a cutting on the hillside, was narrow, and the animal was making for him, either to follow the dog or to spring upon himself. Being unarmed, he picked up a stone which lay close to him, and he threw it at the beast, striking it on the temple and bringing it to the ground. He then ran up and finished it with the butt end of a whip, which was 4 feet long, 11 inches across the forehead, that he had a face very much like a polar bear. It weighed over 7 stone. His forearms were very strong, with great paws that would be capable of giving a terrible grip. It was a tan colour like a possum with strong hair on its skin. When Mr. Marin encountered the creature, When it encountered it, it stood between 6 and 7 feet tall. Such an animal has been reported before visiting selected places. It has gone by the name of the hairy man. Other persons maintain it is merely a wombat and perfectly harmless. It's from the Braidwood Dispatch, published in the Richmond River Herald and Northern Districts Advertiser, Friday 10th of November 1893. Is that a report or a tall tale? What do you think? A wombat, huh? A 6 or 7 foot wombat. Struck it in the temple with a rock, and was able to subdue it with the handle of a whip that was 4 foot long. Tall tale, looked like a polar bear. Did it escape? Did he kill it? If he killed it, what did he do with the body? Did he leave it there? Did he report it to anybody? We don't know. Bloody wombat. 6, 7 foot tall. I'd hate to see that wombat myself, just quietly. Imagine the size of the cave you would dig out with those teeth. Now, this is a bit of a tall story, and there was in those days a lot of tall stories. Hope you enjoyed episode 2. We'll be back again with another sample of stories from Tales of the Past, thanks to Trove, the National Library of Australia, and digitised newspapers. Hope you're going well. We'll talk again soon.